Before we begin, this episode of the Mockingcast is dedicated to the memory of John Owen, a beloved member of the Condon family who died last week. Welcome to the Mockingcast, the podcast of Mockingbird Ministries. I'm David Zoll, your host, and in a few moments, I'll be joined by my co-hosts, Sarah Condon and RJ Heyman. We come to you every other week to discuss a few of the places where we currently see grace and its absence playing out in unexpected and compelling ways. We're glad to have you with us.
Praise the Lord. Praise the Lord. God.
All right, this is the opening question. What did you write your college essay about? What did you write your college essay about? Your personal statement. Let's go back to the past here. RJ, let's start with you.
I don't know. I think I avoided essays at all costs, to be honest with you. I don't remember.
I was like, this is a fancy-ass question, Dave.
I don't remember.
I
don't know. I was. There were definitely schools that I intentionally did not apply to because I had to write too many essays. It's like, let me just write numbers on a page and see if I get in. That's really what I want to do. So
you really didn't have to. That you avoided
I'm sure
it entirely.
I did, dude, but it was like 25 years ago, honestly.
You guys lived in such a different universe than I lived in. Like, it's crazy to hear you talk about this. Like, like at Ole Miss, it was like, are you literate? Okay.
Plus, honestly,
Like, that was-
what I really wanted to do, because I came from like a small waspy town in Connecticut, is I wanted to go to a large, diverse state school, and those are the kind of schools
Yeah.
that don't really require you to write an essay. So it all worked out well. I had no interest in going to like a small liberal arts college or something like that.
No, that's true. No longer. Although Ole Miss, you still don't have to write an essay.
Well,
so
Sarah,
that's why we say.
You must have written one. I can't imagine. You got through without writing a college essay?
I was a musical theater person, so I sang
She sent
a
a
song from
portfolio
Annie
in,
Get Your
portfolio
Gun. Okay.
Okay, can you
Hello?
give us a few bars of that then?
Oh, yeah. Okay, you ready?
Yeah, I'm ready.
Oh, my God. I only remember, like,
I'm excited.
you got the sun in the morning and the moon at night. That's all I remember.
Ooh, vibrato.
Hey, I like
was
that. I hadn't
lovely.
heard the
But
vibrato.
I do need to say this.
Fine.
I just went through this with my oldest son 2 years ago, and I have PTSD from that. So I have plenty to say. But
I mean, we're all going to be doing this.
it's
a lot.
awful.
yeah.
It's the worst.
Yeah,
it's a
yeah.
scam. It's the worst thing ever.
Yeah.
It's soul crushing. It's the worst. So just don't go to college.
So you have got good things to say
Or go to
about
apply to any college that makes you write an essay.
Go to Ole Miss. That will be the title of this
Abandon
episode.
hope, all ye who enter here.
Everyone gets into the University of Mississippi.
Hey, like the kingdom of heaven. It's like the kingdom of heaven. The glade.
Well, I wrote about comic books, you guys. So,
Did you really?
I wrote about comic books. It was ill-advised. I don't think I put my best foot forward, shall we say. But it was my attempt to talk about how I'd gone to, because we'd moved around a bunch and we lived in Europe and stuff. I was trying to highlight the international Euro Dave aspect of my...
Through comics.
By saying, and it actually is true, I went to all these... But ladies and gentlemen, this is the years before it was cool to be a nerd. It was like...
I was going to say, that would probably be great now, but that was not great then.
No. There were no Marvel movies. There's nothing. It was just like, wow, this kid really went to, Stuttgart and found the one place that sold American comics. So that was, and I always...
There's so much to be said here, Dave Zoll. There's so much... I can't believe you remember what you wrote, though.
I can't. That is impressive.
You're acting like this isn't a hugely formative experience for like vast aspects of American society. It is. I hate to tell you.
Just like not where I'm from, baby.
Honestly,
Okay.
it probably was. And remember, I not only applied to college, I applied to like boarding schools, just like you did too, Dave, and had to write essays for that and everything. But I honestly don't really... No, that's not true.
Uh-oh, here it
comes.
We just thought of one.
Here
It was prep school. It was prep, and the school I really wanted to get into. I remember the essay I wrote because the question was, "Who's the most impactful person in your life?"
Did you say Jesus?
I did not. I said my
good.
mom.
Oh, RJ.
And I didn't get in because they thought I was too sensitive and I wouldn't make it.
Ooh. Well,
I mean,
if the
it's
shoe
not fair,
fits,
If the shoe fits. So there you go. So I do remember an essay I wrote, but only because I bore my soul and it became the vehicle for denial.
Oh my God, that's so
Isn't that so
good.
great? Let me show you who I am
Well,
so you can sucker punch me.
I think I've told you guys before, but my younger brother Simeon, who's now an academic, so it took the college experience with him, and he got into Harvard on the basis of an essay he wrote about me bullying him. So
Wow.
Oh my God.
yep,
Praise God.
That's true. So it was basically about how cruel of an older brother I was, and he must have elicited enough compassion and understanding that, like, at that point at least, the top school in the country said, "All right, we want you here." So
They were like, he wrote, like, he was such an asshole that all he wrote about in his college admission essay was how he could find the one comic book store in this small town in Germany. And they were like, he's in. He lived with this guy.
What's going on in Condon land?
Oh, man. Well, it's my birthday on Monday.
Ooh.
Hey,
So 39 years old.
Forever.
Yeah.
Forever.
Yeah.
It's your last birthday.
It's it's such a weird thing. The last thing I got from my parents, I am not going to cry this early in this episode. The last thing I got from my parents was a birthday gift. And it was, I've probably said this before, but it was a robe and a really, really, really beautiful nightgown. And it was like the perfect thing because it's all I wore after they died. Like, and they gave me this card. I can't believe I haven't sent you guys a picture of this. And it's a little girl with like scruffy, like beautiful blonde hair. She looks like Annie, and she's holding a computer in one hand and a coffee cup in the other, and she's in a fluffy bathrobe. And on the inside of the card, it says something like, it's like step 1, coffee, step 2, conquer the world, which is like exactly the kind of card my parents would have sent me. And I love the cover of the card so much. And sorry, I'm like crying in the intro. I kept meaning to call my mom and tell her that I love the card even more than the gift. But I never got to. So anyway, it sits on my Meemaw's Bible on my dresser, and I get to look at it every day, along with a trophy my other grandmother got me that says most beautiful, that she had made at a trophy shop when I was 4.
I remember
No one voted me most beautiful. But she thought I was. It's my little like corner of like love. Of
I think
people
you
that
could have
gone.
written a hell of a college essay about the most beautiful trophy.
I know.
That would
I
just
know.
saying it right now.
opportunity.
Wasted
I know,
opportunity.
right? Anyway, so it's my birthday and it'll be emotional, but it'll also be good. So, it'll be all the things. Mom's birthdays are really about kids anyway. They're like, where are we going to eat? What are we going to get you at Target? So,
Oh gosh, well, I keep thinking of that SNL thing. What did we get for? Mom got a robe for Christmas.
God,
Another robe. And then she got to burn her hands making hot cross buns for the family. Oh, Rutger, what do you got to contribute here? What's
Right?
happening?
Nothing to contribute.
Nothing?
What else is new? What is going on here? I don't know.
punchy today.
Thanksgiving is coming up, I guess, which is weird, and excited for my oldest son to come home and eat a lot of turkey and chill out a little bit. But I'm doing okay. I mean, things feel like they're getting back to normal a little bit. We had a really good Sunday at church. Full Sunday choir was back for the first time since March 2020. But I'm also just really tired. Like really tired. Just been working so hard the past couple years. So a mixture of joy and relief. It's like when you go on vacation and you immediately get sick. Do you know what I mean? It's like your body sort of like lets down a little bit.
Yeah. You're like,
and it's like maybe now
"Ooh."
things are getting back to normal. I'm just going to need to go to bed for like 2 weeks.
Yeah.
It was 58 degrees on Sunday morning, and they're getting in the car, and Marshall turns to Jamie and goes, "It's so cold. It's like Christmas out here." 58 degrees. So.
Oh my goodness.
Florida, baby.
Long way from Connecticut, my friend.
That's right. That's right. Oh my gosh.
Well, let's get back to it. Back to the college essay thing, because Joseph E. Davis wrote an incredible thing for the Hedgehog Review called "The Studied Art of the College Application Essay," and Brian Jarrell highlighted it in his Another Weekends column on the Mockingbird site. And it's by the way, if you're not tuned into that column, we draw on it a lot, and it's fantastic. And Brian opens by saying that it's clear that our secular age, values authenticity, and nowhere is that trend more evident and absurd than in the pressure cooker of college admissions. And if you've been following this at all, you know that like standardized test scores are kind of being devalued as criterion to get into schools, and the personal essay has become more and more important because, for a variety of different reasons. And you could say that it's not so bad because like standardized testing has always been.
I mean, this is good news for those of us who are not gifted in math. I have to say, this is good news for us.
It's never been that accurate of a assessment, I think. But the flip side of the equation is actually that things become more ephemeral and harder to measure because of this word authenticity.
Better the enemy you know.
Here's what Joseph E. Davis has to say. The performance of authenticity is complicated because the application essay involves mixed messages, some of which don't easily mix. The goal of the personal statement, according to the prep service Kaplan, is to show the reader your unique character and traits. Your, quote, unique qualities will shine through if you're honest and genuine. But being different from others is not enough, Davis writes. One's uniqueness only matters if what's special about you demonstrates that you have more to offer than the next candidate. Your authenticity, your specific difference, must lift you above them into that coveted file marked exactly who we've been looking for. But this is interesting because today it's absolute taboo to judge people based on their authentic self. And so what's actually being judged in the personal statement is a person's engagement with their actual self, with their authentic self. Sort of, it's just how aware of your authenticity are you? So this is what Davis says. Since the self is sacrosanct and therefore beyond judgment, but what can be judged in this method of reading is the self's judging of the self. What makes this possibility compelling is that the content of the personal essay is always largely focused on self-transformation. Although there are different prompts that a student can write on, they all share a common theme. They require students to reflect on a meaningful experience, encountering an obstacle, solving a problem, questioning a belief that affected them and brought about some personal development, insight, or new perspective. The self-judgment that colleges judge is a particular type of personal transformation, what one theorist calls a metanoic conversion. Now, metanoia, for those of you who know the New Testament or have read a bunch of Fleming Rutledge, Sarah's looking very confused.
I have no idea what you're about to say.
It's a decisive... it's, I think, the Greek for repentance, Sarah.
Yes.
I'm telling you, I skim this stuff, okay?
It's a decisive, decisive change of heart or thinking. Yeah. It's the experience of a transformation of being, a moving away from a prior self that was deficient in some way. So in the context of the personal essay, that prior condition might be ignorance, self-doubt, naivete, provincialism, misguided behavior. The possibilities are endless. The prior self is not the key. The crux is the change in orientation. So the evaluations of the essay centers on how students present the critical distancing, the finding, in institutionally congruent ways of their motivation and their voice. So what's basically Davis is saying is that in a world that cannot judge someone based on their identities, the college admissions process has turned to judging people based on the quality and authenticity of their repentance. Brian says, look, reader, I have been in plenty of churches that welcomed everyone regardless of their identity, but judged the hell out of them about the quality of their repentance. It's miserable and a recipe for emotional and spiritual disaster. Go find and hug a high school senior.
Oh my gosh.
I thought that's a beautiful interpretation by Brian. But what an interesting thing, because, the personal essay, the personal statement as essentially a demonstration of repentance. Something I used to think
I actually have a suggestion to help students who are doing this. We have been critical of sort of the white woman Instagram that's into like, transracial adoption and like white house paint with just like house plants as decor, and they wear hats. So this is how you shall know them. But they kind of write these over and over again. So if you're a high school senior or the parent of a high school senior, you need to put them on White Woman Christian Instagram.
Ooh.
And just read them, because that's basic. In fact, copy paste. See what happens.
I once was blind, but now I see. And by see, I mean I've got a new filter. And
by see,
I mean
I've gotten a small child from Uganda, and things are great for her.
Gosh.
No questions needed. Yeah. I mean, I don't know. That's my thought. RJ, you have something eloquent to say.
No, I just have a lot. I have a lot to say. I'm so frustrated because I just went through this with my oldest son 2 years ago.
Preach,
and it was
to us,
awful.
preacher.
It was just awful. And I will say, I'll say
What are they looking for?
Well, first of all, what he says they're looking for, I've attended meetings with, college admissions workers from high-end universities who've sworn that's exactly what they don't want. They're like, don't send us the essay that said, I used to think this, and then I went on a trip in Africa summer before my sophomore year, and now I know this to be true. And this encounter with another culture that's less privileged than I am led to a profound reimagining. Like, do not send that essay. We've heard that essay a million times. We don't want it.
That's what they say. Okay.
That's what they say.
They say.
Now, whether that's true or not, and I'll say, we went all in on the college essay. All in. My son took a class offered by his high school like a year and a half in advance of when the college entrance essay was due, which was a week long. The class was a week long. It was during the summer.
What?
During the summer for a week to try to get together the perfect college essay, which we ended up completely throwing away after we ran it by a friend of ours who has worked in the college admissions departments of 2 different Ivy League universities. And he was like, yeah, you need to start over. This is not what they're looking for. So we did. And this whole thing about needing to show transformation without showing it, be your genuine self. You also have to show that you're really passionate about something at 17 years old. How many 17-year-olds do you know who are really passionate about something and know what they want to do with the rest of their life?
He couldn't write about
and
girls.
It just happens to be
Fortnite,
both highly lucrative and altruistic at the same time, and have demonstrated leadership, where they've led others in the same kind of.
Who then can be saved, RJ?
It's absurd.
This is like a wreck, like when a church is looking for a new priest. You know what I mean?
It is. So we went all in, and he went all in, and spent hours and hours and hours, and the whole time is just like, I hate this. I hate talking about myself. I don't want to sell myself. I don't want to brag on myself. I don't know what I want to do with the rest of my life. That's why I'm going to college, is to figure that out.
Right.
And I basically feel like it was a gigantic waste of time. Like if I'm about to do it again with my next son, and part of me just wants to say, dude, write whatever the hell you want to write. It doesn't matter.
Well, what do you think they are looking for? What you just outlined, that basically impossible threading of the needle.
They want a 17-year-old who is fully formed, deeply repentant, politically correct in every sense of the word. Who's done something to change the world already as a teenager. And then maybe, and it would also really help if you, especially for private schools, if you were incredibly wealthy, and or incredibly not. One of those two things. Yeah. So it just seems like such a weird thing. That's my experience.
Are we just looking for young people to save us? Do you know what I mean? Like, it's kind of a fascinating thing. Like, are we just looking for young people to save us? I don't know. I walked onto campus at Rice this week, and they had put up, new signs on the pole. And you know how you have these, cute little, whatever. And so they've taken down all the, COVID, and they put up signs that say, be bold.
Really?
And, even when I was praying with my students yesterday, it just, came out. I was like, Lord, we pray that these students would know that they do not have to be bold like the signs say around them, but that they can rest in you.
Oh my goodness.
They were bold enough to get here. Can we let them take a minute?
Bold enough to wake up this morning. Right.
Right. It's just,
who's good on this is Malcolm Gladwell is pretty good on this, right? Because he just thinks the whole American college entry system, right, is a complete farce. And he talks a little bit. I mean, he's a little bit holier than thou because he talks about the Canadian system where he says there are a few elite colleges in Canada, but they're huge and they get bigger and bigger and bigger as the country grows. Whereas the elite colleges in America are not growing and they're trying to stay small and they want to show the lowest possible acceptance rates. And they're also trying to raise billions and billions and billions of dollars, which they don't really need, and it's a very bizarre. It has to do with status.
Wait, what?
Yeah, exactly.
Status?
Exactly. Status.
College admissions has to do with status?
I know. It's a stupid thing to say.
No, the golden admissions letter is what we worship.
It has nothing to do with what it's actually supposed to be about.
Yeah.
Let's put it
Well,
that way.
and I honestly, like, I keep thinking, RJ, about the kid that wrote the essay, that they had a life-changing experience when they visited a different country, and how that's such a beautiful thing.
Mm-hmm.
And it's so painful to hear that that's not, that they've read that too many times.
It gets
You know, it's just
commodified, and it's like your
oh my
experience doesn't really
God.
count. It's,
Yeah, it's like we want you to be vulnerable, but we don't want that vulnerable. I don't know. Like your experience is not valuable. Like
Yeah.
I don't know. That's just such a bummer thing to say to someone who's like just about to step into college.
I will
Yeah,
say this:
but
if you have a
it's-
kid, and if you have a kid who's about to go through the college admissions process, or if you are a kid going through the college admissions process, which I can't imagine you're listening, but if you are, there's a great book called
Tell all your friends.
"Where You Go Is Not Who You Will Be" by Frank Bruni. Where you go is not who you will be, and it's just stories about people who went to various colleges with various levels of prestige and ranking, and they were okay. Like they did very well, and that it's more who you are, is more important than where you go to college.
That's beautiful. I mean, that message cannot be repeated enough. By the way, I think it's not only is it something that I think hopefully makes its way into some pulpits in the country, but the amount of just pressure that I think that 17 to 18-year-olds who are going to college in America at least are under is just astronomical, and the compassion, if you truly understand what they think is at stake. Even if it's not at stake, but what they think is at stake, you can. If you have blood flowing through your veins, the only logical response is compassion and rest and maybe a gift card. It's like
Yes.
That I've been working with these kids for a long time, and they think the rest of their life is hanging on this one thing. Yeah. And there's the cards are the what college admissions essay gets them in is so arbitrary and has a lot to do because dear friend was one of the head admissions people here. It has a lot to do with what order the essays are read in, what the person reading it had for coffee that morning. I mean, for breakfast that morning.
Did they get in a fight about the dishwasher with their husband?
It is exactly.
Speaking hypothetically,
it is just so. There's no way to game it except for, and yet everyone is under this impression that it's possible to game it. And then again, what on earth are we actually going to? We keep talking about that wonderful documentary that came out a few years ago called Race to Nowhere. And it was all about the college admissions process in America. Probably funded by some parents of some kids who didn't get into the schools they wanted to, but I think it gets at a deeper existential reality for a lot of folks. That when we talk about burnout, a lot of what burnout is about is not only that you're tired, but that you feel betrayed by this system that you thought was meritocratic, that you thought was fair, and it didn't turn out to be. And even if you did get into UVA, Harvard, Berkeley, wherever. That you then find you have more hoops to jump through, and it just never seems to end, and there's no guarantee at any point. And yet that's what you're led to believe at every single stage of it. So I don't know how you can't become cynical.
And if you're a parent, remember that this is not about the sticker you get to put on the back of your car.
The seculosity of
it's not about your own ego. It's not about your quality as a parent. This is about your child and their sense of self-worth and the unconditional love that you shower on them, and the fact that it's going to be okay. There's a God. There's a God in heaven, and it's all going to be okay.
This is such actual small potatoes in the large scheme of things. Yeah. And if all else fails, just encourage one of your children to bully the hell out of the other one.
That's right.
And create some sort of narrative of overcoming adversity in the house.
Totally.
There you go.
Yes.
And don't mention comic books anywhere in there.
No comic book.
You're the gift that keeps on giving, Dave Zoll.
See, this is why people tune in, I think.
But also go to Ole Miss. Okay, we're done with this one. They let everybody in, okay?
Well, it looks really fun.
It is really
And
fun.
Faulkner
And you can
taught
put
there,
an Ole
didn't he?
Miss sticker. Do you know what? There's a great phrase right now they're using in Oxford, and you can put this sticker on the back of your car. It says, well, we win every party. Okay?
We win every party. I love it. Well, on to the next bit of cultural legalism. And this is a heavy one, but also an interesting one from what some people would consider to be a cultural villain, or maybe just people that aren't allowed to speak. Emily Ratajkowski, I think I'm saying that right, and The Burden of Being Perfect Looking by Carrie Batan in The New Yorker. Now, if you know who Emily Ratajkowski is, she is a model. She was in a video for Blurred Lines by Robin Thicke, which I'm not lying, I've never seen, but apparently it made quite an impression on quite a few adolescent boys. Let's just put it that way. She's a model and an entrepreneur. And she's written a book of essays about her life. And this is what Carrie Batan in The New Yorker writes. She says, even in the era of supposed body positivity and self-acceptance, the amount of resources devoted per woman to grooming, primping, nipping, and tucking towards some aspirational physical ideal is extraordinary, and yet so easily shrugged off as part of everyday life. But what about the rare women who are those physical ideals? The women born with the supernatural beauty to which others aspire. This is the position from which Emily Ratajkowski, the model and entrepreneur, writes. If there is a thesis statement to be drawn from her somewhat muddled debut, it's that physical beauty is a heavy cross to bear. Beauty is not an antidote to emotional anguish or self-doubt, but, instead, a breeding ground for more insecurity. Emily writes, I so desperately craved men's validation that I accepted it even when it came wrapped in disrespect. The central and perhaps most exasperating contradiction of My Body, that's the book, is Ratajkowski's warring descriptions of her career path. One moment being on display is an act of pure empowerment that makes her feel badass, special, in control. The next, her career is a hideous double bind that she pursues strictly in the name of financial security or because people won't take anything but her looks seriously. In one of the book's most scandalizing essays, Transactions, Ratajkowski admits that she once accepted $25,000 to sit in a billionaire's box at the Super Bowl. Later, she's invited to go to Coachella, all expenses paid by a creepy promoter, an offer that she is conflicted about. Ultimately, she writes, I was too excited to turn it down. As much as she alludes to being in control, Ratajkowski seems incapable of making a decision that doesn't actively reinforce the things that make her feel bad. Let me just say that again. As much as she alludes to being in control, Ratajkowski seems incapable of making a decision that doesn't actively reinforce the things that make her feel bad. She confesses to still being, quote, addicted to the sensation of being loved on Instagram. It would be dishonest to claim that there isn't something a little galling about a beautiful woman, a beautiful, thin, straight, white woman, complaining about how difficult it is to be perfect looking. And yet, in reading Ratajkowski's essays, one gets the sense that she is genuinely tormented, besieged by a kind of self-doubt that few people would trade their bodies for. She desperately wishes for the world to see her as something more than a pretty face.
Gosh, I have nothing but a lot of empathy for her. I honestly, you know what, it's such a strange thing, but it makes me think of, I took my students, and it was so much fun. I did not know how I was going to go, but it was very fun, to a Renaissance festival here in Houston. And they all got dressed up, and it was pirate weekend. And so, you know, the girls in the group were they're super cute. They were super cute for this. And, you know, I mean, for better or worse, I'm just in like mom mode. So I'm in like a ministry t-shirt, giant shorts, and a baseball hat, you know, and also I'm basically 45. And so I was walking around with them, and we had boys there too, but this did not happen to them. And the comments that they would get just from being in that space, there was at one point, like, I stepped in front of a guy to kind of block him from one of my young women. And I thought, God, I forgot. I mean, and I've never, ever looked like a model, certainly, but I forgot how exhaustive it is to be 20 years old and female, just to exist in the world. And so I can't hear this at all. I mean, I would be interested to read this book. I can't hear this at all and not just have deep empathy for this woman. Like, and the fact that it's so much more complicated because she makes money off of it, you know? So it's like, how do you, and it's so like Romans 7. I mean, that quote is
right?
just like, I do the thing I do not want to do, you know? Like, God bless her. I mean, seriously, like, somebody give her the gospel.
Well, you know, there's always, I think that it's almost a trope in preaching that we talk about people who seem to have it all and that they're not happy, or that or that on the inside they're hurting.
Yeah.
And so you almost hear it so much that you're like, yeah, but still I'd really rather look like her.
Yeah.
You know, still I'd
Right.
really rather be Tom Brady, you know, like,
Right.
and tormented as well.
Right.
But then to read this testimony of what it's really like, that to fulfill the law is not to fulfill the law. I mean, there's no end, and in fact, it's like the higher. What is the thing we always say? The higher you climb on the ladder, the further apart the rungs get. And so, if you meet people at the top of the ladder, they're not less insecure than those at the bottom. They're more insecure. And I can just, as someone who's worked in ministry and at prep schools and to very wealthy places, frankly, I can attest to that being true. It's not just a convenient truth that we tell. It's actually the truth that what she's saying about herself. And you're right. It is brave for her to confess to being so complicit in it.
Yeah.
She's saying, yes, I hate it,
absolutely.
but I also continue to choose it despite not being forced to. And
Yeah.
I love it. And there's other stories in there of her apparently, you know, creepy photographers where she like is both creeped out, but then also trying to impress them. And like wants them to be, she wants to be even sexier than anyone they've ever met. And to admit that in a culture that lionizes, sort of wants to break everyone down into strictly victims or victimizers, she's
Right.
basically saying, I have what
I live in the
everyone
land of
want,
both.
and I am just as screwed up. I am low anthropology 101 here. RJ, as a physical specimen who's remarkably well preserved,
Who's like Benjamin Button. Tell us what it's like.
tell us what it's like, RJ. Do you find it this hard as a man?
I mean, you can cut this, but I once saw a former first lady, RJ Rutger, up and down. So up and down. I was like, what is she looking at? And then I turn, I'm like, oh, it's RJ.
She clearly can't
Oh,
see.
Jamie.
She cannot see the inside. That's for sure.
That's right.
He's going beet red, everyone. Let's hear it, RJ.
It's everything you guys have said, that everybody has their own stuff. Everyone's got their cross to bear, and it's a reminder to me of all those ways in which I think, if only X, then I would be happy. You know, if only X, I would be more at peace, or be able to sleep better at night, or not be so anxious, or whatever it is. And that it's not, all those things are not to be found in attainment or success, but somehow in, I don't know, giving up on all that. You know, finding something that's more, that lasts more. That you know, I say this a lot. It's, you know, belovedness where you are. That you are loved right now, right here, right now. God doesn't need you to be anything more than you are at this moment to be with you, you know, and love you. Doesn't mean he's not working on you. Doesn't mean that he's not changing you. But I don't know. It's very true, and it's sort of what we talked about last week. That getting everything you think you want, being famous, being wealthy, being beautiful, being successful, is not going to lead to the kind of peace and joy that you think it will. And that's something I tip, you know, because I still want those things. Like you said, I still want those things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, I
Still want the bad things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But that's not where it's at, and but it's still the desire for those things. The desire for the affirmation of others is just it's such a unforgiving taskmaster, and it never ever ends.
Yeah.
So Yeah.
What is the quote? You guys remember? It's either I think it's Gerhard Ferde or riffing on Luther saying that the thirst for glory is never satisfied by attaining glory, but through extinguishing.
Yes.
The thirst. What is it, RJ?
Like the thirst for glory can never be assuaged. It can only be or what
extinguished.
Is it? Yeah, extinguished. Something like that.
Yada yada yada.
Yeah, yada yada
I just always
yada.
call him. I call him Gerald. So like where your league's beyond me. Yeah, I keep thinking actually, RJ. I love like how you think about this in a universal way, because like her experience is I actually think is very universal. Like we all have a thing, right? That is the thing that we
hang our hat
both
on.
Yes, yeah. And that we are like trying to keep together, you know? I mean, I think about like how, I mean, maybe she's like naturally looks like is thin and everything, but most people are not. And especially as we age, right? And like a lot of that is kind of beyond your control, but you feel like, you know, controlling every meal, controlling every activity, like how all of that becomes a part of your like neuroses. And we all have a thing that is like that for us that sort of rules us. And you know, I think if you can think about it from that standpoint, I don't know. I just have a lot of empathy for her. I think,
but you're told on one level, you're told you're not allowed to have empathy for someone like that. Right?
Yeah, absolutely. But you know, one needs to only look at like, you know, statistics of sexual harassment and imagine her in an industry that, you know, is really run by men, even though there's a lot of women in it, and how much of that she must. I mean, she's like just in this talking about this book. There's like 2 creepy guys. And that's probably a regular everyday thing for her. Like, God, that just makes me want to pull the covers over my head, you know?
And I think she's like a lot of these things, she's the extreme case that sheds light on the non-extreme cases, because and that's what we actually need to some people would say, well, the extreme case only applies to extreme people, only the mega talented, the people on that level. But in fact, I think and this is actually straight from Luther, that the extreme cases, Martin Luther was a very neurotic person who was very anxious about his standing with God, and that instead of that being only that angst only applying to him in the opening of I think Here I Stand by Roland Bainton, it says that he's the extreme case which sheds light on the general. That the extreme cases in Emily Ratajkowski actually sheds light on what all of us deal with on some level, and this is actually why language of privilege, I think, has a place, and it can be very important, but it also misses the ultimate boat in that the most quote-unquote privileged people I know that has not shielded them from an enormous amount of pain and suffering, and in their own way. In fact, if anything, it sometimes has created more of it. And so this person we're not supposed to feel sorry for, who makes gazillions of dollars, she gets paid $25,000 to go sit in a billionaire's box at the Super Bowl. A lot of people, women or men, would say, well, that sounds pretty damn good. And in fact, no, it's not good. Yeah. It's just hell is getting everything you want, I guess. And I don't think
do we know what her resolution? Like, I wonder what her resolution on this is. Mostly because I'm like, should we ask her to talk at the spring conference?
Well, the person who is speaking at the spring conference is Anne Helen Peterson, who wrote the book about burnout called Can't Even, and
cool.
She's one of the persons. Her newsletter, if people aren't subscribed to it, is fantastic. And one of the people that she has highlighted, Anne Helen Peterson, is someone named Catherine Jezer Morton. Catherine Jezer Morton has a wonderful newsletter called Mothers Under the Influence. She is a PhD student writing about mom influencing, or mompreneurship, or whatever it's called these days. She's fascinating, and the next article comes from Catherine Jezer Morton. Is cozy season a cry for help? I mean, we're in cozy season. I sent you guys earlier on the way to the recording a display from a window right across from my office. It just was nothing about Higgy and cozy season, and are you all cozied up? This is what Catherine Jezer Morton says.
It's Huga. Okay, keep going.
Well, on that note, the momfluencers are big into representations of coziness, but this is one social media theme that it seems like everyone embraces. At the start of the season, I noticed that coziness was coming on with extra ferocity this year. Although one can never be so sure, seasons always seem so loud online. I can say for certain that over the last year or so, coziness has become a powerful social media aesthetic, particularly due to the pandemic and people being homebound. And this is sort of also the demographic you mentioned earlier, the white women on Instagram, Bo Burnham skit. She goes on to say, whatever the origins of the aesthetic coziness online might be, it started out as a feeling, not a collection of objects. The aesthetic tries to conjure the feeling, and I have two questions. How well does it succeed, and why do we want that feeling so bad? Instagram representations of coziness are primarily about safety and comfort, but they're also about order and control. Everything in its right place. The house is cleaned, the candles lit. No unexpected intrusions can disturb the feeling. Just as important as what we see, the couch, the socks, the candle, are the things we don't see. Mess, disorder, the unpredictable reality of the world outside. What if our obsession with coziness has grown in step with our growing feeling of collective precariousness? Economic, environmental, social. My bed is beside a window, and we keep the window cracked at night well into the fall so as to heighten the feeling of being cozy in bed. You can't really get that feeling of being safe and warm without the awareness that out there it's cold. Likewise, the colder and more brutal it is in the outside world of work, social interaction, success and failure, fear and dread, the more it feels precious and delicious to be inside our little homes. She's a great writer. Good Lord. I also think of coziness as a heightened, almost erotic feeling of belonging. You are in your own space, and if there's anyone in there with you, they are allies who truly know you, because you wouldn't share this sock-footed intimacy with just anyone. This is, I think, the melty core of coziness. This is the dragon we're all chasing. Using Instagram, however, to conjure the feeling of coziness is like using an abacus to write a novel. This is where she concludes before she goes off on Brene Brown. But this is what she says. She says, cozy season on social media might be a cry for help. We all want so badly to belong somewhere, and the perfect artifacts of coziness can't help us achieve that feeling. Collect a bunch of cozy projecting objects, and you'll just end up working to maintain your stuff, when what you really need is for your stuff to maintain you. I mean, it's deeply insightful. I think the coziness thing is it could be especially in the time of COVID where people were all trapped at home. Like coziness became our mode of control, our mode of safety, our mode of grace. In fact, but here he says, "Is coziness is the season of the cozy season a cry for help?" What do you two think?
I mean, I love this piece, and I said that to Dave when he sent it to me. I have had this thought before. I had this thought yesterday when I was walking into Whole Foods, and there was pumpkins out, and there was a Kirkland's, and you could buy blankets, and I was like,
and it's 65 degrees outside.
This is same. And this is the thought I had. I thought, I guess this is what we do now. That's always I'm always what did we do 100 years ago? I mean, I always ask myself this question, and it's well, people are farming or whatever. And it's I guess we just go out and buy stuff when the season changes now. And it's very, I mean, the allure of cozy, and honestly, the healing of cozy is important, but And I say that as when Mom and Dad died, Mockingbird basically was, I'm going to put credit where credit's due. Jane Grizzle, who brought everything to my house. Mockingbird gave us all these Christmas gifts. It was the sweetest, most amazing, dearest thing. And I mean, you can cut this, but Nadia Bolz-Weber sent us weighted blankets, really, really lovely weighted blankets. And we've never taken them off our beds, even though it's hot as hell in Houston. And it's super, super comforting for my kids and for Josh and I. And so I think cozy has a place. But I don't think you want to get lost in it for forever. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
I mean,
we're not anti-cozy. That's ridiculous.
We're not anti-cozy. It's just, I mean, I do remember when I hadn't got off the couch for like weeks, and Josh came through and very sweetly said, you kind of look like the grandparents from Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. And it's like, I mean, at some point, like, yeah, you actually need to be. I mean, I really believe as Christians, like, we're called to be in the world and to be with people. And I think that is something that the pandemic took away from us or tried to.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
It's funny. This is a big thing in Dutch culture. It's a huge thing.
Yes.
There's a word, gezellig.
Hygge.
Gezellig.
Okay.
Which I'm not saying. I'm not saying correctly.
Neither of us are
but
saying
it's
right.
it's a huge thing in Dutch culture. This feeling of coziness, and it's historic, right?
Yeah.
If you think about like a Vermeer painting from the 17th century, there are these very intimate interior scenes where people are together and things are in their right place, and there's these rugs and this nice natural light coming in, and it's very
like Peter Bruegel's paintings. Yeah,
it's very cozy.
Yeah.
So it's a historic idea. I don't know if I was tempted to say, I don't know if I'm that into coziness. It makes me feel a little claustrophobic. I kind of want to go outside and jump off something high into a freezing cold body of water and just get
again with the cliff jumping.
Exactly.
With this guy. Okay, right.
But
RJ's such an outdoorsman.
Rugged.
How else do you maintain that physique?
Yeah. But it's also true that I just love being with my brothers. I love being with my brothers, whether it's,
Same.
Thanksgiving or Christmas or during the summer or something, because there's this feeling of just being together and being known, and it doesn't matter what we're doing together, we're just together. And she talks about that too, right? Sort of manufactured coziness versus genuine coziness. And that we're all kind of chasing a feeling of community and belonging, which you can't buy at Whole Foods.
No. Or at Kirkland's. I've tried.
Yeah, and we try to do that, and it works for like a second maybe, and then it just feels like a cheap fake. And Dave, I've really been thinking about something you said about 15 minutes ago about burnout coming not just from being tired, but from feeling betrayed. And that is that's so true. And it fits with the Rajkowski thing a little bit, because we know what we want. We want belovedness. We want community. We want to let our hair down. We want to feel comfortable. And we look for all these ways to get what we want, whether it's through attainment or buying things. And then it doesn't deliver, and it just leaves us feeling betrayed and burned out. And this past year has been a lot of that too, because as much as we've tried to manufacture coziness out of our isolation, it's still just isolation. Yeah. It still just sucks, It's still, it's just, unless you're really blessed to have an incredible group of friends or family that live close by and you've been able to do it together. But even then, probably it's been maybe a little bit too much togetherness. What I mean?
Right.
Because I do love seeing my brothers, and I've wished that at some point we might all live somewhere close together. But I also know, we're all people, and chances are if we saw more of each other, there'd be more conflict. But I mean, Dave, you feel that way about your brothers too, except for Simeon, obviously. But you feel that way about John.
I'm just not going to go on record about any of that. But I will.
I definitely feel that way about my brother.
I will say this: when I always think of coziness, what I always think of, she talks about how Wind of the Willows is like the all-time greatest cozy novel, and Wind of the Willows is about some very dark things if you've read it, and if you've even seen the Disney cartoon about it. But for me, coziness, I always think of Calvin and Hobbes. I always think of
Kevin and Hobbes.
Yes, being by the fire and with hot chocolate. And but what's so great about Calvin and Hobbes, and one of the many things that's great about it, is it's always the both and. It's like he has just tracked in a ton of dirt, and his mom's gonna have to clean it up, or his dad's gonna yell at him or something like that, or he's gonna run away from the bath, and then still there's also coziness as well. Like I remember asking I
never thought about that. It's always like wintry. I guess it's not always, but they've got beautiful sort of winter, fall.
It's Ohio. It's supposed to be Ohio. Well, that's where Watterson grew up. But I remember asking my mother, because we, like RJ, I grew up in the Northeast outside of New York, and we had big snowy winters. And my brothers and I always talk about this, and brothers here play in here too, RJ, but we always talk about how much fun we'd have sledding, and like we'd stay out for hours and then come home and there'd be fire and there'd be melted marshmallows and hot chocolate, and it was just like we have this almost Thomas Kincaid picture in our minds. And I talked to my mom about it after raising small boys of my own and realizing that maybe the the rose-colored reality was a little different. And I said...
The marshmallow-colored glasses.
The marshmallow-colored glasses. Yeah. And she sort of said, yeah, you guys would go outside for 15 minutes and then come in screaming. And, but it was enough for me to have these incredible Calvin and Hobbes-y type memories. So like the Ratajkowski thing, there's a both and to this. I'd never want to be anti-cozy. Who doesn't like coziness? But
you can be cozy in a psychiatric hospital with enough blankets and a flameless candle.
That's true.
You know?
And I think it really
like
speaks
living
to...
underground in Wind of the Willows or something.
No, RJ, they're animals. It's not. It's not actually about real people.
Isn't it kind of like being dead?
Who is cozy like being dead? I don't know. I mean, I live in constant fear of coziness right now.
Because it would suck you in and never leave you?
Because it would suck me in and I couldn't get out.
Yes.
And because I've had that experience in the past year. And as someone who deals a lot with anxiety, but only because of the situation has dealt with depression, it actually is a big fear of mine. Like I will say to Josh, I've said to him recently, like, let me know if I'm napping too much. Am I falling asleep too much? Is it weird for the kids? You know, because it just is, it can kind of pull you in and then not let you go.
You know, that you don't want to go so far as like, well, what we need to be is really uncomfortable and, sleep on beds of nails and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Like the inability to rest is a real issue.
Yeah.
But what you're looking for in this manufactured coziness, it should simply be a barometer that people are in need of dying for something of belonging and comfort and the feeling of love and intimacy that she talks about, which is belovedness. That I think, frankly, is at the heart of what we try to talk about when we talk about God.
Well, it's the best case scenario for church. I mean, I have to say, like, a lot of those things. I know, and everybody, there's people listening, they're like, well, I tried church. But, like, it is the best case scenario in church.
Just go to St. Mike's, okay? RJ, what were you about to say?
Go to St. Mike's.
Rucker?
I was just going to say, I got to believe 90% of the people who are listening relate to just a general feeling of exhaustion and borderline depression right now after the 2 years that we've all collectively suffered through. It's been a hell of a time, and it sounds weird to say that we all just kind of need a couple weeks off, because some people will be like, wasn't that what we had? It's like, well, no, it's not actually, not at all. Not at all. Like you may have been alone and maybe you weren't working, but it was not restful time at all. It was not a community time. It was not a loving time.
Yeah, I mean, if by rest you mean like Googling how many people died today, then yes, it was very restful.
Or Googling how many people were like completely, what overreaction or reaction you're sort of worried about.
Yeah.
Well, let's go to the heart of the matter, which is actually, I'm glad you mentioned Nadia earlier, because she sent out on Reformation Day a sermon, which she called Sin Boldly, and in which she really captured, I think, something of what we're trying to convey when we talk about the gospel and we talk about the law. So it's a good refresher course for all of us, but it spoke to me powerfully just in my just daily life. She starts out by, and bear with me, she says, Martin Luther had a way of talking about sin that makes a whole lot of sense to me now. To him, sin was bigger than simple immorality. Sin was more than the big bad things others do so we can feel superior for not doing. Sin, according to Luther, is the self being curved in on oneself without a thought for God or the neighbor. In that case, it can be alcoholism, or it can be passive aggression. It can be the ways I manipulate others to get what I want, or it can be adultery. It can be embezzling funds, or it can be that feeling of superiority when I'm helping others. Sin is the fact that my ideals and values are never enough to make me always do what I should, feel what I should, think what I should. And the law is anything that reveals those shoulds to me. The shoulds in our lives are the things that make us see how far off the mark we are. This means, again, the shoulds are not necessarily bad. They're just revealing. And feeling convicted by the law looks, this is incredible, like every feminist who in secret hates her body, and every televangelist who's really addicted to porn, and every social worker who doesn't actually look into the eyes of the homeless man they pass every day on the corner. They all know what the law can do to us, how cruel the distance is between our ideal self and our actual self can feel. And that feeling of not ever really hitting the mark, whatever that mark is the feeling of the law convicting you. The medieval church had pawned off law as gospel, and Luther dared to know the difference, and then he became preacher of grace, and that changed the world. This isn't just a medieval thing. What passes for preaching in most settings, liberal or conservative, is some version of here's the problem and here's what you should be doing about it, which I have never in my life heard as good news. So in celebration of Reformation Sunday, I would like to offer us a field guide for spotting the difference between law and gospel. Here we go. You can tell the law because it is almost always an if-then proposition. If you follow all the rules in the Bible, then God will love you and you will be happy. If you lose 20 pounds, then you will be worthy to be loved. If you live a perfectly righteous, green, eco lifestyle, then you will be worthy of taking up space in the planet. If you never have a racist or sexist or homophobic thought, then you will be worthy of calling other people out on their racism and sexism and homophobia. The law is always conditional, and never anything anyone can do perfectly. When we treat the law as if it will save us, as if it is gospel, there can never be flourishing. Under the law, there are only two options, pride and despair. When fulfilling the shoulds is the only thing that determines our worthiness, what is it, RJ? You are not, where you go is not who you will be. When fulfilling the shoulds is the only thing that determines our worthiness, we are either prideful about our ability to follow the rules compared to others, or we despair at our inability to perfectly do anything. Either way, it's still bondage. And that's why the gospel is different. The gospel is not an if-then proposition. The gospel is a because proposition.
Oh my gosh. She's so great.
Because God is our creator, and because we rebel against the idea of being created beings and insist on trying to be God for ourselves, and because God will not play by our rules, and because in the fullness of time when God had had quite enough of all that, God became human in Jesus Christ to show us who God really is, and because God would not be deterred, God went so far as to hang on the cross we built and did not even lift a finger to condemn, but said, "Forgive them, for they know not what they're doing." And because Jesus Christ defeated even death and the grave and rose on the third day, and because we all sin and fall short and are forever turned in on ourselves and forget that we belong to God and that none of our success guarantee this and none of our failures exclude this, and because God came to save and not to judge, therefore you are saved by grace as a gift and not by the works of the law. And this truth will set you free, like no self-help can do. And took us to school.
I mean, it's so good. And for me, it's really like good, sweet news to hear this, like, you know, wildly popular Christian clergy person, woman, progressive, like, say this stuff to the world. Like, it's just, I don't know, like, for me personally, like, it's incredibly uplifting and encouraging. But I mean, I actually watched an Instagram of Nadia. Did you see? I don't know if you saw this, but I saw it last night.
Or she's deciding to pull back from
social media. And it was like such a good, I mean, it was just, I'm so interested. This is like a weird thing to say that because she's talking about pulling back from some of the stuff, but she is producing content in other places. And I'm so interested to see what it is because, you know, the story about her, do you know this story that there's lots of reasons she's pulling back, but her nephew was killed in the fall.
Yeah.
And she wrote on Twitter, which, you know, is like the scariest place in the whole wide world. Grief disfigures. That's all she wrote. And immediately somebody came on and said, like, that they couldn't believe she was making such an ableist comment. And I felt very convicted by, like, I watched that and I was like, that is exactly what the world feels like. So for me to hear her talk about the law, like, she gets it. You know what I mean? Like she lives in that in between gospel place that's very hard to live in, and I'm thankful for her voice.
I didn't know that. I mean, I knew about what had happened, but I didn't know she certainly experiences a lot of correction.
Yeah.
And for her to get up here and say some of this stuff, I think all these years, later, I think is what is it? Bold.
Sarah.
Be bold, Nadia.
But Rutger, what do you say?
That's a beer commercial. That's like what's the beer? Is it? It's some it's some Mexican beer.
It's just
with Sylvester Stallone and some boxer. He's like, "Hey champ, be bold." So Rice is cribbing from Mexican beer commercials. Good to know.
So funny.
For me, it's just convicting because it's just so easy to fall back into the law. It's just so easy to think. If I just get my theology right.
If I just look like Emily Ratajkowski.
If I just have a really cozy living room.
Well, yeah. But even as
if I just write the right college essay. Sorry.
Yeah, even as a Christian, as a pastor, as a person who says yes, 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 and believes all those things, am I communicating to myself and my flock, if you just believe in justification by faith alone perfectly, then you'll be at peace and you'll be set free, and theology matters, faith matters, belief matters, but we're not going to get anything right on this side of it, or not going to get much right on this side of the veil. So you do the best you can to proclaim the gospel as faithfully as you can, knowing you're going to make massive mistakes. And so you confess and repent and move on and count on God to make things happen. Right? That's the promise, is that God works through our broken humanity, even when we totally blow it. And I'll say there have been times I've been really pessimistic. It's easy to be cynical and pessimistic about the church in general, and then I'm like, oh yeah, but you know what? This seems to be the way that God has wanted to work for the last 2,000 years. This seems to be the way he wants to do things, as imperfect as it is and imperfect as I am. And that's not to excuse all the stuff that happens, but God is faithful in the midst of our inability to get anything right. So Dave, what were you going to say?
I mean, no, I think I was walking with a friend the other day, and this is a person who, he comes to, at least 2 years ago, was coming to church regularly, comes to church, loves our church. He considers the message of God's grace to be foundational to his life. And he's asked me how it was going. And I said, well, to be honest with you, our church is 40% smaller than it was 2 years ago. And if it were a business, it'd be shut down, and it would. I mean, there's a lot of you could go all day long about how views on Instagram, on YouTube and all this stuff,
so sick of,
and even giving and all that things is fine. But you want to say you go from having 600 people on a Sunday to seeing 325, and that's a little demoralizing. And I said, sometimes I can't help but think that if the devil wanted to completely gut churches and make it impossible for the people who need the coziness and belonging and intimacy that it provides to feel like they couldn't come, then they would, this pandemic and the way that all the communication and the schools and the children and the vaccine, all the stuff, every aspect of it seems almost perfectly geared towards wanting to shut this sucker down. And he looked at me, he's like, well, what makes you think the devil would want to do that? Maybe it's, from what I read the Bible, God is in the business of doing that sometimes. I said, shut up.
You shut your mouth.
I do not want to hear that message right now. How dare you believe this more deeply than me?
We're amazing and he loves us and he only wants us to grow.
He only wants
for his glory and sort of for our...
He wants
dare
my
you
thirst
justify
for
your
glory
sleeping
to be
in.
satisfied. But I thought to myself, whatever happens, God's doing something. And
that is my favorite thing when people clap bad grades to me. I'm like, okay, look, I'm the one that told you about it. All right.
This doesn't apply to me.
Yeah.
I don't know. I thought it was a zinger that cut me to the core.
Yeah.
Well, that's all I got for today. That's a lot. I'm going to feel like I'm just going to go pour myself a cup of coffee and sit in front of a fire and maybe...
Ooh, amazing.
RJ, you have anything, final word?
Yeah, I've been thinking about this a lot lately, that I'm feeling more and more that part of just believing this is true is holding everything in your life with a loose hand. Holding absolutely everything with a loose hand. And just... your successes, your failures, your dreams, your fears, your pain, I don't know. You just hold it all with a very loose hand, and you're just constantly waiting to see what God does. The doors he opens, the doors he closes, the things he shuts down, the things he grows. And not to get too holy detachment somehow.
To care and not to care.
To care and not, I say that to people all the time. How do you care and not care? Like, this is the most important thing in the world, and it's all going to be okay, and God's in charge. So over to you, big guy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, happy birthday, Sarah.
Thank you.
Have a great one.
Hopefully, we can all sing Annie, get your gun next time.
That's right.
I'm still reeling. Thank you, guys. Talk to you later.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you for listening. Remember, you can find us on the web at www.mbird.com. And we'd always love to hear from you at info@mbird.com. Audio production for the Mockingcast is provided by TJ Hester. And if you like what you've heard, please drop over to iTunes and leave us a rating or review. Until next time.